So in our last video, we talked about some different schools of economics and how we can possibly implement some of those ideas into our current monetary system to improve our standard of living, our purchasing power, and the overall sort of society, I suppose. Today, we're just going to go through some general critiques of those schools of economics just for the sake of neutrality. The first general critique we're going to bring in today is from the Austrian School of Economics. Now, the Austrian School of Economics believe in a gold standard, or they believe in a currency that is backed by a commodity or something of real value. For example, if you had a $20 bill, that $20 bill would be backed by 1 ounce of gold, for example. That's what we had in the past in a lot of different countries. We now operate under a fiat system. Now, what are some critiques of a gold-backed or commodity-backed system? One of the critiques is that it doesn't provide for enough liquidity to meet economic demands. So, for example, if you have a fixed currency, it means that your government can't just print off and inject huge amounts of liquidity into an economy because it needs to be backed by gold. So if the central bank or whatever bank was going to print out money, they would need to match that with X amount of gold. They were going to print out $20 of money. You'd have to back that with 1 ounce of gold, but you'd have to actually mine the physical gold out of the ground to then match it to the actual money. Therefore, the critique is that in times of maybe a financial crisis or times where the economy is expanding a lot, you want more liquidity to meet business demands, individual demands, people taking out loans, you need more liquidity. The general critique is that, well, if you're on a gold standard, you can't actually meet the demand of the business, of the individual who needs more liquidity or money to engage in whatever activities they want to. Another critique of the Austrian School of Economics is that they typically believe in deflation. Now, in our current society, we currently have like inflation where prices rise over time relative to our incomes. Prices go up. We have inflation. Now, deflation, the Austrians believe that prices come down. How does this happen? This happens through essentially supply side economics, which the Austrians believe in. They believe in sort of an excess in productivity over time. We become more and more productive. We increase the goods and services supplied in the economy through businesses and individuals providing these goods and services over time because we've got a fixed amount of money, which is backed by the gold, and we have an increase in the supply of goods and services. These goods and services become, in some sense, less scarce. Therefore, they're less valuable. Therefore, their price drops relative to the amount of money in the economy. Therefore, prices fall. It's kind of the opposite of inflation in some sense, where you have the same amount of money supply, or at least a fixed money supply, but an increasing amount of supply of goods and services. But in our current economy, we have a decreasing amount of supply of goods and services, roughly speaking, and we have an increase in the money supply. So it's sort of an opposite effect where in one system, inflation or prices rise relative to income. In the deflationary sort of Austrian fixed money supply, ideally prices fall because we're producing more and more goods and services, but the currency or the amount of currency or money floating in the economy is fixed, therefore prices should fall. The critique of deflation is that essentially consumers may delay spending because they know something is going to be cheaper in the future. For example, we in our society right now want to buy property now because we expect that it's going to be more expensive in the future. However, in a deflationary system, we think something's going to be cheaper in the future. So, for example, if I want to buy an apple today for $1, but I think that apple may be 50 cents in a week's time, then I may delay purchasing my product. Now, what's the problem with that? It means that if people delay purchasing, then businesses aren't earning any income. Therefore, they're going to have to lay off workers. They're going to have to cut costs, all these things to try and incentivize somebody to purchase their product. Now moving on to the Classical School of Economics, which was largely founded or started by Adam Smith, who's known as the father of economics. Now, the Classical School and most schools of economics, they believe in sort of markets correcting themselves. So we're always looking at scarce resources with alternative uses and how to best use those resources. And the market is typically always allocating them. So we have housing, we have wood, we have apples, we have windows, whatever we are wanting to purchase, people constantly purchasing those things. That determines the price of them, that determines how many are needed to be produced. All these signals are constantly going on a day-to-day basis. That is the market functioning, and there are trillions of different market decisions being made every day by businesses and individuals. The classical school and many other schools, they believe in just allowing the market to function. Let people and businesses, let contracts happen, and that will allow for the market to determine what is needed, what the prices are, where resources should be allocated. Now, the general critique of the market theory is that it's not always right, and we don't always know how to best manage it. So, for example, if there is a financial crisis, or there's a big recession, or there's a depression, and unemployment is at 20 or 30%, well, those people don't want to be unemployed, right? They don't want to actually be unemployed. So the idea is that in the market theory, those people become unemployed. The resources of labor and capital and production, they are temporarily going to be unemployed while the market sort of resets. But the critique to this is that, well, possibly in the long run, if things get bad enough, we might have 20, 30, 40% unemployment, and we're all dead in the future, which is what John Maynard Keynes was famous for saying in the Great Depression, was that, well, if you don't intervene in the market failing and sort of resetting, then we're all dead anyway. So again, these are just general critiques. The classical school of economics believe in the market just sort of adjusting to things, taking time, meeting that sort of equilibrium between supply and demand. And the general critique to this is that, well, the market can't always be right, and there is a need for sometimes like central government intervention, a central bank intervention, all these sorts of things. Now moving on to the monetaristic school of thought, largely known as Milton Friedman's school of thought. Now, Milton Friedman was very critical of central banks, and he believed that they should only really control the money supply of a country. They shouldn't manage interest rates. There should be no sort of intervening with fiscal policy or by the government to try and increase, maybe, say, jobs in a time of financial crisis. And that the government should have sort of limited role, I suppose, in allocating resources, and that most resources should be allocated by the market. Now, what is the general critique of this idea of sort of limited intervention and just focusing on the money supply? Well, the general critique is that there is a role for, say, a government to allocate resources to spend money into certain places that it wants to spend them, and that they should have a larger role in determining where resources should flow. And this is the same for the central bank. The central bank's role should be more than just setting the money supply. They should be able to sort of use the tool of interest rates and other sort of uh, policy tools, I suppose, to allocate resources. For example, if there was a financial crisis and the market had set interest rates at 5% at the time, then the critique would be that the interest rate should be able to be set by the central bank in a time of a financial crisis. They would probably slash those interest rates to 0% or 1% to try and stimulate the economy. Now, the last school of economics we need to touch on, guys, is the Keynesian school of economics, or founded by John Maynard Keynes. What were some critiques to the Keynesian school of economics? The Keynesian schools of economics largely believe in things like central planning, central banks controlling interest rates, government using fiscal policy to determine where resources should go and should flow. The critiques of this are that essentially the market should determine where resources should flow. It's very much the opposite of what we just talked about. We talked about sort of the Austrians and the classical school of thought believing that the market should um, decide where resources should flow. Keynes believes that a central government and a central bank have more control over those sorts of things. So it's the opposite in the sense that the market should determine where resources flow, not a central planner. So again, these sort of schools of thoughts are constantly sort of at battle with each other, sort of bringing forward their ideas, why they're right, why they think either central planning or a decentralized system would operate better. Just to summarize Keynes, in a time of a financial crisis, Keynesian school of economics would believe in sort of intervening, bailing out the banks, injecting liquidity through the government, slashing interest rates from a centrally planned central bank. And then you'd have your critiques to that, which would be like your Austrians and your classicals, to say, no, 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 let the market fail, let the resources allocate themselves by the market to determine what is the real rate of unemployment, where should these resources flow, and allow interest rates to be set by, say, the market to determine what the real rate of interest is. Now, remember, guys, this is just general critiques. These aren't my ideas. I'm just using other schools' thoughts around the general critiques of these ideas. I'm just trying to lay them out to you guys here in a general summary. So again, guys, we've got these kind of different views on economics from all these different schools of economics. and how they believe scarce resources with alternative uses should be used and managed. Again, these are not my views, but I think it's just really cool that there's like a bunch of ideas out there, and we can take these ideas and implement them into our own system and ideally move the conversation forward. Thank you very much for listening, and have a great day.